America Change. Feel free to weigh in there at facebook.com/cspan. The House gaveling in next, a busy afternoon of legislative work, 21 bills, including one that would deal with falsifying military service for profit. Also another bill that continues an expiring visa program. Let's go live to the House floor here on C-SPAN.
The House will be in order. Prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. Loving and gracious God, we give you thanks for giving us another day and for a safe return to Washington. Bless the members of this assembly as they set upon the important work that faces them. Help them to make wise decisions in a good manner and to carry their responsibilities steadily with high hopes for a better future for our great nation. May they be empowered by what they have heard during their home district visits to work together. May the energy they have derived from respective party conventions be merged into a common sense of hope for our great nation. On this day, which has become a day of national mourning, help us to remember as well the renewed sense of national courage and resolve that we need to work toward a better future. May we all be inspired by the heroism of so many 11 years ago to be the best that we can be this day. May all that is done today in the People's House be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Everyone, including the guests in the gallery, please join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas rise?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On September 11, 2001, it's a day that will forever be etched in our nation's memory. Today marks the 11th anniversary of the tragic terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center, Pentagon, and the crash of Flight 93 in Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 innocent people lost their lives that day. For one family in my district, the tragedy of September 11th hits close to home. Batesville native Sarah Elizabeth Lowe was a flight attendant on American Airlines Flight 11, the plane that hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center 11 years ago today. Sarah was just 29 years old, and she loved her job as a flight attendant. The community of Batesville, Arkansas may be small in population, but today they are enormous in heart and in remembrance of the life Sarah Lowe lived. For 6 years now, the Batesville community has held a 5K run to remember Sarah, and a memorial now stands in her honor at the junior high school. Today, my thoughts and prayers are with Sarah's parents, Mike and Bobby Lowe, and all those in Batesville who were blessed to know her. May God bless the memory of Sarah Lowe and all those who lost their lives on September 11, 2001. Yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in remembrance of those who lost their lives on September 11, 2001, 11 years ago today. For the nation, September 11 marks the day that the course of history of the United States was changed forever. For New Yorkers, 9/11 was the day our great city suffered a grievous blow, leaving behind a hole in the heart of lower Manhattan and an even bigger hole in all of our hearts. While many of the structures destroyed or damaged by the attacks are being rebuilt or renewed, the families who lost their loved ones can never replace the husbands, the wives, the fathers, the mothers, the brothers and sisters, and the children who perished. We can also never replace the brave first responders who rushed into the burning buildings, giving their lives for others. Not one single day goes by that families don't think of their loved ones who are lost and we must ensure that 9/11's sacrifices are never ever forgotten. Today we stand together in honoring their memory and saluting their courage, which they so richly deserve. Johnny, we miss you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, 11 years ago today, our nation was attacked by a group of Islamic terrorists who declared war on our country and the freedoms we cherish. The innocent civilians who were murdered by this act of terrorism will never be forgotten. In order to protect American families, our country's military capabilities must remain the strongest in the world. Sadly, due to the President's policies and the looming threat of sequestration, our national security stands at risk. The budget reductions to defense will reduce the Navy to the smallest fleet since 1916, the smallest Army and Marine Corps since 1939, and the smallest Air Force since it was created. House Republicans have passed legislation to save 2.14 million jobs by offering a replacement for sequestration. Unfortunately, the President has failed to show leadership and refused to act. It is my hope the liberal-controlled Senate will put aside party politics and work to prevent the weakening of our defense capabilities. In conclusion, we will never forget the cowardly attacks of September 11th on innocent civilians.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise? The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we commemorate the 11th anniversary of the attacks on our country, we should recognize the men and women who have fought so bravely for our country over the last decade. This weekend, I had the honor of holding a welcome home ceremony in my office for Sergeant Major Marvin L. Hill. Sergeant Major Hill enlisted in the Army on January 18, 1978, and served this country in a wide variety of roles for 35 years. Most recently, he was selected by General David Petraeus to serve as Command Senior Enlisted Leader for the International Security Assistance Force, ISAF, and United States forces in Afghanistan, a great honor and a very important job. Command Sergeant Major Hill's numerous awards and decorations include the Bronze Star Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal, and the Joint Service Commendation Medal for Valor, among many others. Our city is proud of Sergeant Major Hill and all the men and women who serve in our armed forces. I want to particularly express appreciation for all the non-commissioned officers who put their lives on the line every day and defend this nation. As we bring the operations in Iraq and Afghanistan to an end, I look forward to welcoming home all of our brave men and women serving to protect our freedoms. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized.
Well, Madam Speaker, we will never forget where we were on that fateful day 11 years ago on September 11th. The images of two giants falling towards Earth will not only be remembered by those who lived through it, but will also be reborn anew with each generation of Americans through images of terror and countless stories of courage and sacrifice. Today we come together to remember those who lost their lives on September 11th in New York City, at the Pentagon, as part of Flight 93, and to reflect on more than a decade of struggle to ensure future generations live free from terror. We must also pay special tribute to our first responders and to those who have since 9/11 donned the uniform of our armed forces and placed their own lives on the line to defend our country, and to the more than 6,500 who have paid the ultimate sacrifice. So let us continue to keep those who have lost their loved ones in our hearts and prayers, and may we never forget September 11th. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize September as National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and I'm proud to represent the nation's first comprehensive cancer center, Roswell Park Cancer Institute, an amazing place that continues to turn kids into survivors. 30 years ago, less than 50% of those with childhood cancer lived beyond 5 years of their diagnosis. Today, it's over 80%. According to the Center for Disease Control, over the past 14 years, childhood leukemia deaths have fell by 3% in each year. We know that cancer research saves lives. The only failure in cancer research is when you quit, or you're forced to quit because of lack of funding. Last weekend, our community held a fundraiser along with the St. Baldrick's Foundation in memory of Anna Rose Levoy, a young girl who lost her battle with cancer only 2 weeks after her second birthday. We must recognize the urgent need to fully fund cancer research, to raise awareness for children like Anna Rose, and to find a cure. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized.
I rise on this somber anniversary to honor the memory of those lives lost in the attacks on September 11, 2001. For 11 years, I have stood at firehouses and schools, churches, and veterans halls and heard the stories of bravery and heroism from that terrible morning that changed America. New Jersey lost more than 700 residents in the attacks, innocent people who were targeted in an act of war upon the nation. Brave first responders courageously initiated rescues with their lives in danger. These stories are not new, but need to be retold as a new generation comes of age and is taught of the determination of our country. The lives lost in the ensuing battles abroad have continued to try the foundation of our will. We have proven steadfast in the commitment to our values. Our freedom and liberty have been protected by brave men and women who selflessly answer the call of service. No matter the challenges we face, we must remember that our nation is truly blessed. I ask all Americans today to pause and reflect on the tragedy of 9/11, and please pray for the victims and honor their memory, and please pay tribute to the men and women who serve and defend us today against the dangers we still face. May God bless them all, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
I ask to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, on this day, as on every day, we should be working toward a better future for America. Yet by almost any measure, days in session, committee markups held, bills voted on or signed into law, this is one of the least productive Congresses in more than half a century. By design. Everyone knew last year times would be tough, but despite that, the House Republicans who control the schedule scheduled a year of congressional inaction. Their ideology dictates that Congress can and should do nothing. There is work to be done. Where is the jobs agenda? With just days left in this congressional session, let's get to work.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to revise and extend.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the Obama administration has said that they have created 4.5 million new jobs in the last 4 years. But, my colleagues, CNN, along with another group of individuals, in fact a host of other organizations, have really fact-checked this claim. They found that despite a surge in temporary hiring for the 2010 census, there are actually 400,000 fewer non-farm payroll jobs today than when the President took office in January 2009. But our job crisis is actually much, much worse because a large chunk of Americans have simply given up looking for work, and the jobs have not come back and aren't the same ones that we lost. Also, according to a study released by the National Employment Law Project, low-wage fields such as retail sales and food service are adding jobs nearly 3 times as fast as higher-paid occupations. But we need to add these higher-paying jobs. The sad truth is that there are fewer people working now than when President Obama took office. And, Madam Speaker, these are simply the facts.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to remember the tragic events of September 11, 2001. As we honor the nearly 3,000 lives lost that day, my thoughts remain with the loved ones of those who did not return to their families. We also remember with pride the national unity that our country showed that horrible day and the days that followed. In tragedy, we laid our differences aside and found common purpose. The legacy of 9/11 is our ability to say with certainty that no enemy or threat can change the values of our country and that which it stands for. I remain awed by the bravery and valor shown each day by our first responders and their brothers and sisters in uniform and by ordinary Americans. In Tucson, we have a special connection to 9/11. Christina Taylor Green was a 9/11 baby. Today would have been her 11th birthday. She died in the tragic shooting on January 8, 2011, when she came to speak with her congresswoman. Just as on 9/11, we saw the spirit of the American people who came together in prayer, compassion, and unity on January 8, 2011 and the days and weeks that followed. This is who we are as a people and who we always will be. God bless all of us and this great country in which we are privileged to live. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
I ask permission to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, as we commemorate the monstrous crime committed against America on 9/11, let us remember the plight of an heroic figure who helped us bring justice to those who murdered our fellow citizens on this day 11 years ago. I speak of Dr. Afridi, the man who risked his life to provide the intel our forces needed to locate and eliminate Osama bin Laden, who now languishes in a jail in Pakistan. There has been no resolution through this Congress nor public effort by the United States government to support Dr. Afridi in this, his hour of need. He has been tortured, his family has been attacked, and he is still in a desperate situation. It behooves us as Americans to state in a unified and loud voice to his Pakistani captors, Dr. Afridi should be freed. The continued incarceration of Dr. Afridi affirms to all Americans that Pakistan is not our friend, but instead is a partner in terrorism, especially those terrorists who are murdering our fellow Americans. Dr. Afridi, our motto today must be, free Dr. Afridi.
Lady from California seeks recognition. The gentlelady is recognized.
It's been 11 years since blue skies over New York were blackened with soot, 11 years since the Pentagon sustained its only attack in history, and 11 years since the heroism of our countrymen over a quiet field in Pennsylvania. Today, we remember and honor all of the lives lost on this day 11 years ago. In the aftermath of 9/11, we mourned those who lost their lives. What had seemed so far from possible just one day before was ever present from that moment on, and we will never forget. From the ashes came stories of heartbreak, like twins born on September 15th who never knew their father. From them and so many others, it's not 11 years, it's every single day. As we reflect on this anniversary of 9/11, let us remember those 3,000 people, the fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, and brave first responders, and the values of this country for which they lost their lives, our tolerance, our democracy, and our freedom.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we reflect as a nation on that tragic day 11 years ago, our thoughts and prayers go out to the families who lost loved ones. Out of the horror of the murders of thousands of innocent souls rose the selfless, heroic spirit of America. Thousands of first responders rushed into danger to help their fellow citizens, total strangers. Thousands of warriors have paid the ultimate price to defend us. The sense of national unity that spontaneously arose was something none of us will ever forget. We, the living, must pledge not just in words, but in deeds to never forget. We in this body, as representatives of the American people, must work to see our colleagues first and foremost as Americans, and members of a political party a distant second. To truly honor the principles that this nation stands for, we must see this other side of the aisle for what it truly is, a 3-foot space that's not so hard to reach across. Let's honor the memories of those who gave so much on and after that fateful day by working together to truly create a more perfect union. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from New York seek recognition? The gentlelady is recognized.
Madam Speaker, today we mark the 11th anniversary of 9/11. The tragedy that day still burns in our hearts, and once again we renew our pledge to never forget. The thousands who died and the thousands who rushed to rescue them truly deserve this moment of honor and remembrance. But today there is also good news for those who became sick as a direct result of being exposed to the deadly toxins. As part of the James Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act, which Speaker Pelosi and my colleagues in the House, and especially the New York delegation, fought so hard to pass, the World Trade Center Health Program ruled yesterday that 50 kinds of cancers will now be included under the Zadroga Act. This important step means that those who have developed cancer, often years after their exposure, will have the opportunity to receive the needed care and compensation that they justly deserve. On 9/11, thousands lost their lives and thousands more lost their health because of their exposure to the deadly toxins. Many are sick and dying. I am proud that the Zadroga Act can now include their needs and hope that they accept once again the thanks of a grateful nation. Thank you.
For what purposes? The gentleman from California seek recognition.
The rest of the House for 1 minute and revise next member remarks.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor the life and legacy of a true American hero, the first human being to walk on the moon, Neil Alden Armstrong. I had the privilege of meeting Neil Armstrong and introducing him to my son Eli at an event commemorating the 40th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing. It has been said that we are all dreamers, but Neil Armstrong inspired generations of Americans to dream big and reach for the stars both literally and figuratively. He believed that the yearning to explore is part of what makes us human, and his singular achievement on July 20th, 1969 still inspires. A reluctant hero, Mr. Armstrong never used his Apollo 11 achievement for personal gain. On more than one occasion, he questioned his own notoriety, protesting that his walk on the moon was the result of the dedication of more than 400,000 people, from engineers who designed the lunar module to ground controllers who monitored every aspect of the mission, to seamstresses who stitched by hand the suit that kept him alive on the moon. The late 1960s was a time of tumult in America, when our nation was riven by Vietnam, the struggle for civil rights, and the emerging women's movement. In the midst of this, Armstrong's climb down from the lunar module's ladder and his giant leap for mankind united not just Americans but people of all nations as they watched. That night, countless children looked up at the moon and dared to dream. I yield back.
For what purposes does the gentlelady from California seek recognition? The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As we mark yet another anniversary of a September morning that dawned just as any other, we are first and foremost called to remember. But as we remember the fear and the grief of a day born of unfathomable hate, we remember, too, the impossible heroism of so many of our fellow Americans. We remember the firefighters and the police officers who ran into the burning buildings to get others out. We remember the brave men and women of Flight 93 who, learning of the attacks throughout the country, decided they would give their lives that others might live. And we remember those early days when we came out of our homes, joined together with our neighbors, with flags and candles, united as one American family. And when bitter political adversaries stood on the steps of this Capitol and put their arms around each other and sang, "God bless America." But we shouldn't have to look back to feel that again. For the sake of those who died, for the sake of all those living and all those yet to be born, let's come together in this House. Let's not be the do-nothing Congress. In honor of all Americans, let's come together and work for the good of this country. Thank you. I yield back.
For what purposes? The gentleman from Virginia seek recognition.
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
And the gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, our governments and our people have successfully prevented the tragedy of 11 years ago from being repeated. But we need to be mindful of the fact that it does little good to protect ourselves from without if we allow ourselves to become weakened from within. When our families aren't adequately employed, when our government isn't adequately funded, when our economic potential is so unfulfilled, we do a disservice to the people we were elected to serve and to protect. And when the majority in this House refuses to take action on a real jobs bill or on any of the other important issues that we should be legislating, we have no business being out of business for 49 out of the next 56 days before the upcoming election. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Illinois seek recognition?
Seek permission to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today our hearts turn to the heroes and loved ones who lost their lives on 9/11. We'll never forget the sacrifices of the first responders who are appropriately receiving special honor today. Yet firefighters and police officers are being laid off around the country. Why? Because the Republicans have sabotaged all efforts to avoid those layoffs and create jobs. It will be 1 year ago tomorrow that the President sent to Congress the American Jobs Act, which would put people to work in areas critical to our communities and our economy, cops and firefighters and teachers, and would prevent those layoffs. Independent experts estimate that his bill would create up to 2.6 million jobs. But has the Republican do-nothing Congress even allowed a vote on the American Jobs Act? No. Instead, they found time to vote repeatedly to end the Medicare guarantee. And next week, Republicans will leave town and leave America without a jobs bill. Our first responders deserve better.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Speak for 1 minute.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to mark the 11th anniversary of the vicious attack on America. I appreciate the leadership scheduling a memorial service on the steps of the Capitol this morning, but more needs to be said, and I fear time and events have dulled our memory. It was 11 years ago that our nation changed forever as a violent international extremist struck in the streets of Lower Manhattan and in the fields of Pennsylvania and at the Pentagon. When that day was over, and as we learn more about that tragedy and, yes, murderous attacks and the loss of nearly 3,000 Americans, including 700 New Jerseyans from my home state, we witnessed neighbors and friends consoling one another and watched as Americans from all walks of life stood united side by side, waving the stars and stripes and lighting candles to honor those lost or missing. Today, this afternoon, I must remind our fellow Americans that we're still a nation at war, largely because of those events. We remember those who lost their lives on that fateful day, but we also remember the sacrifices of those who served in Iraq and Afghanistan to make sure that those responsible for those attacks paid that ultimate sacrifice, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Hawaii seek recognition? And the gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We all probably remember where we were when we learned about 9/11. We all probably had someone that came to mind immediately when we watched the horrific attacks on this nation. For me, I thought of my friend, General Eikenberry, who was at the Pentagon on the side that the plane crashed into. Though Hawaii is the state farthest away from the East Coast, we were also touched. We knew of at least 9 who had ties to our state who died on 9/11, and I want to honor them by reading their names. Georgina Corrigan, Richard Keene, Miley Hale, Rick Yee, Patty Collidner, David Lachek, Christine Snyder, Heather Ho. Heather is someone special to me. Her grandfather actually built the town that I grew up in. We must also honor the brave men and women in uniform who gave their lives to this country in wars following 9/11. Speaker, we must never forget, and this country must never forget. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Vermont seek recognition? And the gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, America needs a farm bill. The Senate has passed a farm bill. The House Agriculture Committee, on a bipartisan basis, has passed a farm bill, and that is not being brought to the floor for a vote. We have a drought that's the worst that we've seen in 50 years. We've got nutrition programs that need to be funded. We have environmental and conservation programs that need to be revised and passed. We have farmers across this land whose goal is to feed America, and they need a farm bill. Never in the history of the United States Congress has a farm bill passed by the House Agriculture Committee not been brought to the floor for a vote. There's no question that a farm bill is contentious. It always is. But with Frank Lucas and Colin Peterson, Republican leader and Democratic leader, and the Agriculture Committee working together, we got a bipartisan vote. Why is this not being brought to the floor? That it's difficult is not a reason not to do it. Bring a farm bill and pass it.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition? And the gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the South Florida community recently lost a hero when World War II veteran William Kling passed away at the age of 84. Bill Kling, a native New Yorker, served in the Navy during World War II. Throughout his life, he was an active member of the American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Jewish War Veterans, and the Disabled American Veterans. For me, he was an inspiration and a friend. However, Bill is best known for his role as president of the Broward County Veterans Council for 27 years. Bill's activism led to the building of an outpatient VA clinic in Broward County, a veterans nursing home in Pembroke Pines, and the opening of the South Florida National Cemetery in 2007. So even as we mourn the loss of an incredible advocate, we know that Bill Kling's contributions live on. In every veteran cared for at the outpatient clinic he helped to build, in every family who visits an elderly veteran residing at the nursing home he helped to establish, and in every prayer spoken at the National Cemetery that he helped make possible. I join with Bill's family in mourning his loss, but on this anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, I express the gratitude of our entire South Florida community that will long benefit from Bill Kling's tireless efforts to honor those who so bravely served our nation. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, today, September 11th, 2012, is a beautiful day outside. The sun's in a cloudless sky, much like it was 11 years ago. We remember those tragic criminal terrorist acts. We remember the heroism of those who responded. But there is something we can do more than just remember. There's something we can do in addition to the prayers that we offer. We can act tomorrow to pass FISA amendments, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act amendments, which allow us to respond to the criticism rendered by the 9/11 Commission. That is that we did not do enough to connect the dots of intelligence to warn us about that attack and future attacks. The FISA amendments allow us to collect the dots so that we can analyze those dots, so we can bring the intelligence to bear, so that we can protect our people with the courage and the bravery of those men and women who are in uniform, guided by the intelligence that we collect and that we apply. It is as strong a statement as we can make this week to ensure that we do not blind our eyes to that which is out there that may threaten us. Let us work together on a bipartisan basis to pass that, and let us give those things, those tools that are necessary to protect us.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or on which the vote incurs objection under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Record votes on postponed questions will be taken later. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4631 as amended.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4631, a bill to amend Title V, United States Code, to institute spending limits and transparency requirements for federal conference and travel expenditures and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Walsh, and the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, each will control 20 minutes, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the bill under consideration.
Without objection, and the gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the Government Spending Accountability Act, or GSA Act, will end the days of unnecessary boondoggles and lavish trips for federal bureaucrats. I think we're all aware of GSA's recent escapades in Las Vegas, where the agency paid more than $44 a head for breakfast, $7 in sushi at a networking reception, and $75,000 to build bicycles. I think we can all agree that all of this spending is outrageous and unacceptable. We can't continue to ask hardworking taxpayers to tighten their belts and make tough decisions when for years the GSA and other federal agencies have thrown away those taxpayer dollars on lavish conferences like this. Well, the days of wasting taxpayer dollars on fancy junkets for government bureaucrats should soon be over. I introduced the GSA Act because as stewards of taxpayer dollars, it is our responsibility to ensure that they are not wasted on lavish conferences and posh junkets. The GSA Act requires that every quarter federal agencies publish an open report that details every conference for which the agency paid travel and expenses. The bill also limits the amount that an agency can spend on any one conference to $500,000 and on travel annually to 70% of the amount the agency spent on travel in 2010. I would like to thank Chairman Issa, Ranking Member Cummings, and my friends across the aisle for joining me in this effort. The bipartisanship displayed here shows what Congress can do, can accomplish, when both parties come together to tackle reckless spending. We need to come together to fix Washington and start cultivating some respect for hard-earned taxpayer dollars. The GSA Act will help change the culture of waste in Washington and put us on a path to sustainable future for our children and grandchildren. Please join me in standing up for taxpayers. I support this measure and urge its adoption, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves his time. The gentleman from Missouri.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise in support of H.R. 4631, the Government Spending and Accountability Act as amended. This legislation will improve congressional oversight of the federal government spending on meetings and conferences. It is modeled on similar reporting requirements contained in the Data Act, which passed the House of Representatives earlier this year with bipartisan support. This legislation will help rein in the type of wasteful spending of taxpayer dollars that we have witnessed over the past several months. In April, the committee held a hearing to examine the GSA's expenditure of $800,000 on a single conference in Las Vegas in 2010. The gross abuse of federal funds must not be repeated, and one way to avoid that is to monitor more closely how federal agencies use their funds on such activities. We are all aware that conferences are an important part of staff development and can help improve the quality of federal government work. However, we must make sure that they do not turn into resort vacations funded by taxpayers, many of whom are continuing to struggle to make ends meet. Madam Speaker, the GSA incident tarnished the reputations of government workers who dedicate their lives to public service, which I believe is unfair. This legislation, as amended, will prevent a few reckless and selfish individuals from engaging in activities that discredit the entire federal workforce. And, Madam Speaker, I urge the support for this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Illinois.
I continue to reserve and just inquire if there are any speakers.
I do have one speaker. Yes, I do.
Gentleman from Illinois reserves. Gentleman from Missouri.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I'd like to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey.
Gentleman from New Jersey, recognized for 4 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I thank my friend from Missouri, and I rise in opposition to H.R. 4631. I oppose this bill because it would make significant changes to federal employees' ability to travel to conferences and meetings. And although I appreciate the sponsor's effort to ensure oversight on travel expenditures, I'm not sure they realize the impact that this legislation would have on science and technology, which is the engine of American innovation. This bill institutes prohibitions and impediments that would hinder American scientists' ability to collaborate and communicate with scientists at other institutions and laboratories. Now, to be sure, they can probably get around these prohibitions and impediments, but we should not be putting these in place in the first matter. As a scientist, I know firsthand how important scientific conferences and meetings are. The informal conversations as well as the formal presentations and poster sessions and everything else that goes into it between scientists from different institutions lead to new collaborations that have the promise of new discoveries. These are not fancy junkets. Now, people often ask students, well, what is science? What's so special about science? Why does it work? Well, it works because one of its fundamental tenets is communication. To be sure, there are various ways to have communication, but scientific conferences are critically important. In a recent op-ed by the presidents of the American Chemical Society and the president of the American Physical Society, they discuss, for example, an anti-cancer drug that was the result of collaboration between a team of scientists from 3 laboratories that took place at conferences. This bill would hinder that kind of collaboration. And just about any scientific society in this country can give you examples where large numbers of federally sponsored researchers go off to conferences. It happens in plasma physics, it happens in microbiology, it happens in AIDS policy and AIDS research. In a time where the federal government should be making science a priority, passing a bill that would make scientists jump through hurdles and get around impediments would, in fact, weaken American scientists, weaken American science, and impede the ability of American scientists to innovate. That is not wise. This is not the way to build our economy. We should be investing more in research and development, which means, of course, investing in scientists, but also investing in their ability to pursue science. We should be spending more on international conferences. We should be spending more on national conferences. We should be spending more on national laboratories. We should be spending more on public and private research and development for the sake of jobs, for the sake of our economic vitality, for the sake of the quality of life of Americans. This is not the way to build our economy and to foster innovation. I urge my colleagues to vote no.
Chair will receive a message.
Madam Speaker, messages from the President of the United States.
Madam Speaker,
Mr. Secretary,
I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives messages in writing.
Gentleman from Illinois.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
I appreciate the concerns of my colleague, and I would only note that new technology, I think, has made it easier to teleconference and collaborate remotely. This not only would save money, which is important, but it's already and will continue to increase the amount of collaboration.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'd be happy to yield.
Do you think the Congress of the United States might do better if we don't meet in person? If we stay home and get on conference calls every once in a while and phone in? I don't think so. I think the gains that are made in good legislation that come from conferences as we gather here for votes, on the side, between votes, is invaluable. The same can be said many times over for microbiology, for plasma physics, for let's go through a long list. Thank you for yielding.
Thank you. And again, I would say Congress, in today's day and age where we hit $16 trillion in debt last week, Congress, like all institutions in this country, needs to figure out how to work more efficiently and save hard-earned taxpayer dollars. Madam Speaker, I urge all members to join me in support of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Missouri.
Madam Speaker, I also urge my colleagues to vote in favor of H.R. 4631. I yield back the balance of my time.
All time having expired, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4631 as amended? Those in favor will signify by saying aye. Opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chairs, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 538 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 538, a bill to require the establishment of customer service standards for federal agencies.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Walsh, and the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, will each control 20 minutes, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman
I ask
recognized.
unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend the remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The private sector has raised the bar for customer service, and citizens expect the same from their government. The American people rely on federal agencies to provide important services and information, but these agencies often fall short of providing the customer service taxpayers deserve. H.R. 538 ensures the federal government keeps pace with the public's expectations and delivers better value to the taxpayers. Agencies currently have discretionary authority to include courtesy demonstrated to the public in employee performance appraisals and to reward superior performance. While some agencies have incorporated customer service standards in employee performance expectations, they do not always require good customer service to the public. Under this bill, OMB and agencies will develop performance measures and standards for agency customer service, with employees at all levels held accountable for achieving results. Taxpayers should have high expectations of government. Agencies must deliver services efficiently and at low cost. Federal employees must provide effective service to customers. H.R. 538 will help ensure agencies streamline service delivery and improve the customer experience. CBO has said there is no cost associated with this bill, and in fact, any savings incurred are due to be put forward, paying down the federal deficit. The Oversight and Government Reform Committee worked on a bipartisan basis to advance this legislation. I supported it when it passed by voice vote in committee, and I urge its adoption today, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back or reserves his time?
I reserve the balance of my
Gentleman reserves
time.
his time. The gentleman from Missouri.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume, and I
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. And I rise in support of H.R. 538, the Government Customer Service Improvement Act. This is a good government bill that will improve the way federal agencies interact with the people they serve, and at this time, I'd like to yield to my friend from Texas, the author of the bill, Mr. Cuellar. 5 minutes.
Gentleman from Texas, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, gentleman from Missouri, I thank you so much for the leadership, and thank you. And I certainly want to thank also Mr. Warsh, also from Illinois, who actually called me before this, which is rare to have somebody from the other side of call and say, how can I help you on this bill? So I think I find that refreshing, and I want to say thank you for working with us and folks on this side of the aisle. This bill, the Customer Service Improvement Act, is a bipartisan bill that has folks like McCall, Duncan, Goodlatte, and other folks supporting this particular bill. Certainly want to thank Chairman Issa and Ranking Member Cummings for their work, and the members of the committee on this bill for passing it from the Oversight and Government Reform Committee unanimously in April. The primary goal of the federal government is to serve the taxpayers. This common sense bipartisan bill seeks to establish, monitor, and improve customer service across federal agencies. It ensures that taxpayers get the quality of service that they deserve when interacting with federal agencies. Too often we hear that veterans are waiting for months to get critical medical services, or that seniors are waiting for months to get their benefits, their retirement benefits. These are just two examples that millions of Americans who rely on federal agencies have to wait on vital services, which is why we must usher a new chapter to accelerate response time and overall performance for a better customer experience. With a sweeping 79% of Americans dissatisfied with the federal agency services, according to the 2011 Federal Customer Service Experience Study, we must all work together to make sure that Uncle Sam and Americans work together. This bill is simple and necessary. First, H.R. 538 improves customer service standards across the board. It does this by requiring the Office of Management Budget to develop performance standards to determine whether federal agencies are providing high-quality customer service and improving service delivery to agency customers. According to a 2010 GA report, federal agency customer services standards were often not made easily available for customers to find or access, and were not made available to the public at all. In other words, if we provide customer service and somebody wants to know how that agency is providing the service and the standards, it must be made available. Second, the bill raises the bar for enhancing quality and access to customer service. This is accomplished by requiring agencies to collect information from the customers regarding the quality of the service, and again, this must be a way that we raise that standard. Third, it puts a face on accountability. The bill requires that each agency designate an employee to be its customer relations, so that way when somebody's dealing with a federal agency, we must know who they can complain to, who they must talk to in order to provide that customer service. Just like in the private sector that strives to provide excellent customer service that they bring in order to get more business, the federal government must do the same thing. And as the gentleman from Illinois said, there's no cost on this, according to the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. And again, I would ask that we all work together to provide better service. To all, I say thank you, and to the gentleman from Illinois, Missouri, I thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Illinois.
Madam Speaker, I urge all members to join me in support of this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Illinois, or Missouri.
Madam Speaker, again, I urge the House to adopt H.R. 538, and I yield back the balance of my time.
All time having expired, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 538 as amended? Those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Chair lays before the House a message.
To the Congress of the United States, Section 202D of the National Emergencies Act provides for the automatic termination of a national emergency unless, within the 90-day period prior to the anniversary date of its declaration, the President publishes in the Federal Register and transmits to the Congress a notice stating that the emergency is to continue in effect beyond the anniversary date. Consistent with this provision, I have sent to the Federal Register the enclosed notice stating that the emergency declared with respect to the terrorist attacks on the United States of September 11, 2001, is to continue in effect for an additional year. The terrorist threat that led to the declaration on September 14, 2001, of a national emergency continues. For this reason, I have determined that it is necessary to continue in effect after September 14, 2012, the national emergency with respect to the terrorist threat. Signed, Barack Obama, the White House.
Referred to the Committee on Foreign Affairs. In order printed. Chair lays before the House a message.
To the Congress of the United States, Section 202D of the National Emergencies Act provides for the automatic termination of a national emergency unless, within the 90-day period prior to the anniversary date of its declaration, the President publishes in the Federal Register and transmits to the Congress a notice stating that the emergency is to continue in effect beyond the anniversary date. In accordance with this provision, I have sent to the Federal Register for publication the enclosed notice stating that the national emergency with respect to persons who commit, threaten to commit, or support terrorism is to continue in effect beyond September 23, 2012. The crisis constituted by the grave acts of terrorism and threats of terrorism committed by foreign terrorists, including the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001 in New York and Pennsylvania and against the Pentagon, and the continuing and immediate threat of further attacks on United States nationals or the United States that led to the declaration of a national emergency on September 23, 2001, has not been resolved. These actions pose a continuing, unusual, and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States. For these reasons, I have determined that it is necessary to continue the national emergency declared with respect to persons who commit, threaten to commit, or support terrorism and maintain in force the comprehensive sanctions to respond to this threat. Signed, Barack Obama, the White House.
Referred to the Committee on Foreign Affairs and ordered printed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition?